Hi and welcome to this Mission Cast. My name's Matt Burgess and I'm one of the communication team at Mission Performance. If you don't know about us or haven't listened to us before, we are a group of actors, directors, stand-up comics, theatre folk who use the skills that we have in what we've done throughout our careers to help people in business. I'm delighted to be joined today by Emma Kilbey. Emma's one of the communication consultants with us at Mission. Morning.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm sitting here in my flat in Brighton. The sun is shining. The dog is snoozing. What more do you want?
Has the dog had a walk already today?
Yes, she has, but not quite long enough for her. So she's slightly grumpy. She's giving me side eye from the sofa.
Side eye from the sofa. Emma, tell us a bit about yourself. What's your background outside of the work that you do with Mission? What do you do?
I suppose to give a bit of context, I'm a kind of polymath, I think we call it, a portfolio careerist. So without giving you my birth to now story. I started out after university as a journalist. So I was lucky. I got a break and wrote for newspapers, national magazines, etc., women's magazines generally, and became a production editor. So I had a full-time job for 2 years and found that somewhat limiting because I don't like being told what to do, what time to have lunch, etc. So I went to drama school, did a postgrad at Arts Ed. And then since then, I've leveraged my writing in as much as I write scripts for myself and for other people. I act, I sing, I direct. Obviously, I do a lot of corporate work across the sectors, facilitating, creating, designing training packages. So I do a lot. I've forgotten to have kids, so I need to have something to show for that time.
I didn't know that about your writing. How do you always come back to writing? Is it something that is kind of there with you constantly?
Yes, I mean, I write a lot anyway, so I'm a big recorder, a journaler. So if something happens, which is significant, well, anything can be significant, can't it? But I tend to sort of get a pen and a journal and just go. I find it really comforting, and it accompanies me a lot of the time. And I get those little creative sparks now and again. And I've got books full of these sort of random ideas.
Is that a cathartic process?
Yes, definitely. It's something about, I'm big on connection, communication, understanding, empathy, working out how people run themselves. That's why I love what we do. We're truffling out people's potential, aren't we? It's all around psychology and understanding myself and my impact and why I behave the way I do and how others behave,
So one of the things you sort of just touched on by saying, look, this is something I do, but you do very successfully, is that you're a theatre director. And you have directed everything. We were talking earlier, you've directed everything from Shakespeare to Pinter to modern classics. The area that I wanted to talk about today was the fact that at the moment and more recently, you have been doing something that is a specific skill set and a challenge that, and we can talk about this, but perhaps is undermined, which is transferring kids' stories, children's stories onto the stage.
Yes.
How did you get into that? Tell us a little bit about it.
The dog is ruffling up the sofa right now. I'm sorry if there's any background noise. Yes.
Side eye and ruffle.
Yes. So how did I get into it? It's funny, isn't it, when you try and trace it back. So I was asked to be part of a group of actors, actually, to do research and development for a week on Harry Hill's musical, which never eventually got made for various reasons, of Tim, is it The Tiny Blue Horse? He's written a children's story.
Okay.
So I played everything from a Brummy lovelorn ladybird to a sort of Mexican fly in that. It was fantastic. So we were creating stories, you know, voices, physicality and all of that good stuff. And within that, because it's the same production company, I got a good relationship with them. They knew I was doing a lot of directing at Chichester University, a lot of adaptation. They came to see something I did. They wanted Zog to be rerun because it was already in production, but Julia Donaldson wasn't quite happy with the version that was out. So they wanted to go back to the drawing board. Matt, the dog's going through the bin. I'm really sorry.
We can't hear. I don't think we can hear anything. I think you're fine. Just go back for people that don't know Zog.
Right.
What is Zog?
Yeah. So Zog is a very popular Julia Donaldson book, and it's about a dragon school and a particular dragon that called Zog, who's big and orange and doesn't quite fit in. And he tries and tries and tries his hardest, but he almost tries too hard. He can't succeed because he's clumsy, he's over emotional, and the overall message for children is just keep trying and be yourself, and you're good enough as you are. And then he meets this little girl who's a princess but who really wants to be a doctor, and she helps him when he cuts himself, when he bangs into a tree when he's trying to land, and it's a really good, without getting on the feminist high horse, it's a really good premise because it's saying you can be whoever you want to be, and girls don't have to be pretty and pink and wear frilly dresses. They can decide their own destiny. So it's a brilliant story, and it's funny and it's sweet. I mean, you've read it to your boys, so you know what it's like.
Many times, and it's written by Julia Donaldson, of course, who many of Julia Donaldson's books, for anyone who doesn't know, and I'm sure everyone probably does, they have all those themes in them, don't they? They have a journey. They're funny. They make kids laugh, but also there's a deeper underlying message that's coming across. She's quite, and this is going to sound ridiculous, she's quite Shakespearean, isn't she? Just in terms of the quality and the output, how many books she's written.
Yeah. Well, what you just touched on as well is that their stories are so well made because they're heroes' journeys. It's about coming up against challenge. It's about coming back with the grail, the elixir of truth or whatever. It's where we're on the side of the person who's clearly going through a quest. And it doesn't necessarily always have a neat ending. It has the right ending for that particular character, for them essentially to be authentic. And I think all of that is really important. As people sort of say, well, it's a kid's story, but it's a human story, and kids' stories are so representative of, our processes, our journeys through life, and it just distills it down into all of the things that humans encounter. And it might be a bumped knee or a grazed head in a children's book, but it could be a divorce or losing your job or a death, in an adult's life, without sounding over dramatic. But it's about how to deal with obstacles, really.
And I think they're about how to be human, aren't they? Let's come back to that, because we'll touch on, maybe this element that they're slightly undermined later on. So you were asked to do Zog, is that right from that?
Yes, so I was sent along to see the existing version of it, and they said, can you do a show report for us, without at the time saying, we want you to direct it. So I thought, hang on, they're not just asking me for their health to go and watch this. So I went, I did a very detailed show report, and then they said, would you like to direct it? And I said, yes, please, thank you very much.
But effectively, at that point, if let's take out the fact that Zog had been done before, when you get one of these books, you've got something that rhymes or doesn't rhyme, and you've got a picture of a dragon or a picture of a rabbit or whatever it is, and you've then got to put that on a stage.
Yes.
Couple of questions. Firstly, what's your big question? What's your process for doing that? And secondly, well, do that one first. What's the process you go through?
Okay, so as you know, when you read these stories, even if you spend time doing silly voices and chatting about all the pictures on the page, the fantastic Axel Scheffler pictures, it's only going to take you about 12 minutes to read the whole thing. And our challenge is we have to get it up to an hour or just under an hour. So what we have to take, the book is the source. There's no point in trying to sort of turn it into a version of, the book is the Bible. So the text has to be in it. And that's the starting point. Then it's really important to mention Joe Stilgo, who's the guy that I collaborate with. We're doing the next one as well, Zog and the Flying Doctors. He's an incredible composer, lyricist, son of Richard Stilgo, for those old enough to remember him. We really chime. We work very, very well together. So what I tend to do is have dream time, I call it. I'll look at all the moments that could come out of the moments, that if we need an extra few minutes here and there to get the audience to collaborate a bit more, could we build a game into that bit, for instance? We look at where the song points need to be. So Zog has about 8 songs in it, and they're all thematic. They're all about what is this bit trying to encapsulate. And then I will contribute lyrics here and there, but he's a genius with lyrics and very funny. So we have a process of, I'll go with all my list of moments I want to augment, if you like, because I get ideas from the book. I look at the pictures and think, there's a whole scene there with the rabbits and a crow, who could be like the crows in, is it Jungle Book? That the crow's sitting on the telegraph wire. Is that the right film?
Is it Jungle Book?
You know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
So, there's commentary all over the place, and the commentary can be what the audience is probably thinking, but through the eyes of a kooky character. But so, I'll take loads of ideas, and it's sort of scattershot. I've come up with all kinds of pictures and little jokes, and then we'll find the song points. Where do they balance out? Where do they sit? What's the moment we're really trying to bring home? And songs, I'm really passionate about this as well, because I've been doing more musicals lately. Songs have to either give you more information about a character, or they have to further the narrative. So they're like rooms and corridors. If you're in a museum, you're in a room, you get more information about a portrait. A corridor is like the connective tissue to the next bit of story. The songs are very funny, and they appeal, as does a lot of the narrative around the actual text in the book. It's about appealing to adults. So there's Muppety type stuff in it, because I love the Muppets. There's little messages, there's little in jokes, And the best thing that I was, the first show we ever did, so we'd worked on it, obviously it was all ready to go. The first preview, it was packed. And to me, this encapsulates why it worked. There was a couple in front of us, and they didn't know that the producer and the director and the musical director were sitting behind them, obviously. And it was quite a young, trendy couple with two little girls. And the dad turned to his wife and said, "I'm just going to have a nap." Because a lot of the time, and I get this, people see a kids show as rather expensive babysitting. So this is before it had started. And then it started, and he began to lean in, and I saw him keep looking at his wife going and pointing at the stage. And by the end of it, there's a lot of opportunity to get up on your feet, because it's very joyful. He was up dancing, and I thought, that's it, we've done it, because it's got to appeal on that level. Otherwise, it's lazy if it doesn't.
That response from an audience, you remind me of that story that Spielberg tells about when he made Jaws. They did the first previews of Jaws. They showed it to the first audiences, and he was convinced they were missing a beat. They were missing something. So they went and re-edited in his editor's swimming pool the scene where Frank Gardner's head drops out the boat, that big scare moment.
Yes.
And then they previewed again, and he, for the first week of previews, apparently he and Dreyfus used to go and stand at the back of the cinema and just walk in, timed it to walk in at that moment. Everyone would scream, popcorn would go up, and they'd kind of smile and walk out. So,
yeah, we've aced it, exactly.
I said, so that process is complicated, but equally you're surrounding yourself with people who can take that on board. That's not every actor can do that. So you've already talked about the fact that you have a great relationship with the person who works with you musically. What are you looking for in the rest of the team? What are you looking for in the actors?
Well, when I audition them, because as you know, auditioning, if you get that right, is you've hurdled, half of the process really. So if you get the right team, you're going to be able to get on with it and make work. So obviously they need to be able to act. So what I do is give them, certain sort of excerpts that are minimal at this point, because there's a lot of devising involved. And then I give them all an exercise. So there might be a group of 15, put them into smaller groups, and I give them a place, a person, and an object they have to pick out of envelopes. And I want them to give them about 10 minutes, create a scene that involves all of those three things. Very simple in theory. What they probably aren't aware of is, because they're so focused on, working on it, is that I'm sitting there beadily watching how they work together. And if anyone's, being too dominant, or who's quiet but full of good ideas, as well as practical things like who's really physical, who's good with their voice. And then they show those pieces and they sing as well. They have to do a song because they have to be able to hold some quite big numbers. So it's a combination of those things. So I'm looking for the ability to play, the ability to be open and a bit daft, and actually just being a good person. And because collaboration, as you know, is all about listening and being empathic. You have to be an empathic actor anyway, but especially with kids theatre, I think. So we get that team, and then we get into a room and I say, okay, this is my vision. These are my ideas. Here's the songs. You're going to learn the songs, and we're cooking it together, folks. I mean, that's not entirely true, but I'm setting up that sense that they're trusted, that they feel safe, because you cannot get people to risk anything if they don't feel safe. So it's a very light, happy, but seriously meaningful in terms of, creating something that's fun, but has heart and soul to it. And my big old kind of watchword for any process is that it's fun. If we're not having fun, then how can we expect the people who's going to sit and watch what we've done to have fun?
You said earlier that Julia Donaldson didn't like the first version of Zog.
Yes.
This is my second question. How much creative license do you have? You've said that the book is the source and it's the Bible, if you like. How much creative license do you have to take it in your direction? And at what point do you find out whether the writer agrees with that direction or likes that direction, or is that not of interest to you?
Oh God, it's of massive interest to me, partly because, obviously you want that person to like what you've done and to be, I mean, she clapped her hands with glee when she came to see our first run through, which phew, because from a pride and professional perspective, you want that, but also, you know, you have to do it justice. You can't go too far away from the spirit and the intention of what's written. And what's I'm not sure I'm quite answering your question, but when I see children, I love going to watch the children watching, because when I see them being rewarded by what they recognize, and getting songs and getting up and dancing around and, you know, looking at their parents and pointing at the stage going, look, mummy, you know, it's joyous because they have to be rewarded by what they know. You know, that's why it's exciting, isn't it? If you think, I've seen this in a book and now they're all in 3D and they're moving around and waving at me, and, you know, and that brings me so much cheer.
I remember similar to Zog, I was in the cast of Warhorse that transferred to the National from the National Theatre to the New London Theatre in the West End. So I'd never done it at the National. So like Zog, there was an initial version of it, and we were putting a new version of it that had to be slightly different because it's a different stage dimensions and all of those things. Remember how important it was when Michael Morpurgo saw it for the first time. Yes. You're kind of, you know, you're really eager to get a sense of whether he enjoyed it, the performances. It's important, isn't it?
It's really important because it's her creation, it's her baby, and she's got very clear ideas about what it means. And, you know, we're not talking, it's not Dostoevsky, you know. we know what the meanings are, but people can still get that wrong, interestingly.
Yeah, but you say it's not Dostoevsky, and this is interesting to me. So there's a kind of rich history of children's shows, isn't there? Yes. And they translate to massive box office. So things like the Grimm's Tales, when the young Vic did them as Christmas shows, or Warhorse, where the National, and it was almost like it, for me, it slightly redefined theatre, that there was suddenly this big blockbuster Christmas show that would happen that wasn't necessarily a pantomime. It was the adaptation of a children's book. And I've been in a couple of shows, and we've talked about this before. There is a slight, it's not as important as Shakespeare, or it's not as complicated, or it's not as difficult. And I would always argue that actually devising something, taking something from a page where you are joining music and physical theatre and using a very small amount of language, is an incredibly detailed and complicated process. And not only that, you've got the challenge of making that resonate from, we always said, from Warhorse 8 to 80. From, yes, you know, from Zog, maybe from 5 to 80. Yeah. How important are these shows, firstly, and how important is it that they do that they resonate for adults as well as children?
Oh, I mean, I'm sort of, I was being a bit flip, wasn't I, about you know, Dostoevsky. But it is really important because they're, like any good story, they're sort of fabular. You know, if you look at their essence, they're talking about things that are about the human condition, ultimately. It feels really, I mean, I've had a lot of messages from the joy of having a show out all over the country with your name on the poster, which is, I'm still getting used to that, by the way. Is that friends of mine who live all over the country would send me a picture of the poster and then say, we're going to see it on Wednesday. And then I get messages saying, oh, I loved it so much. Oh, and little Johnny loved it as well. But, you know, that people don't necessarily have high expectations. Going back to this reference to the guy talking about, oh, I'll just have a nap, you know. People see it as a little bit of colour, sound, little bit of diversion. And that's just not enough for me. It's shortchanging adults and kids, but mainly kids, because kids aren't stupid. And they might not be able to tell you exactly why something has worked for them, because they're not talking about form or, the nuances of it, but they come away having had a sort of full body experience of joy, basically. So it's massively important to me that it resonates on every level for everybody.
Kids are a brutal audience.
Oh, they're really brutal.
Utterly brutal. I was in Watership Down that we did at the Lyrics, so we'd play audiences of 600 kids. And if you don't keep their attention through the way you're telling that story, through your characterization, through the journey, it because you can hear it.
Yeah, exactly.
What all of this, what can you take to business from this? Why is this important to somebody who's not necessarily a theatre goer? What can they learn from everything you've been describing?
When I go into a room or online and work with people, it's all about trying to get them to be their best selves. And when I walk into a rehearsal room, it's the same process. So it's creating the conditions for people to learn, improve, be honest, be authentic. And I'm interested in people's stories. I think storytelling is massively important in a business environment, because humans run businesses. We have this terrible sort of divide, I think, which is why I love what we do, because we don't have to bolt on the metaphorical shoulder pads. I can be myself and be cheeky and create a fun atmosphere. And you see people, the relief, they sort of lay down their shackles, their work personas. And it's the stretch zone, isn't it? But they're having fun at the same time, and they're put into a place. There's a little bit of adrenaline, there's some games, but there's also some serious learning to do. And it's exactly the same approach I have, just notched up slightly differently to when I go into a rehearsal room. So, and I know now, I've done it enough times that I've proved to myself, that I know what I'm doing. And that's a really positive thing to bring into a room, I think.
I think there's something else you talked about as well, sort of rather wonderful description of what you're looking for in an actor when you're setting them those challenges in the kind of the audition process, is that you're actually looking for somebody who can work with other people, and you're looking for somebody who is open, who can play, can work as a team, can listen really well. And I think the best teams, whether those teams are in sport, in the arts, in business, all have those component parts of people who are able to do that.
Yeah, and it's something about shrugging off. My sort of BS detectors are very honed now. It's shrugging off the personas as well. And you get that in business. So the smoke screens people put out to look more important, how am I perceived? What's my status? And I tend to be able to spot that a mile off and think, is that really you? Are you working from your best self here? Or are you bring your whole self to work. So if your values are different at home to what you're showing me at work, where's the alignment? So it sounds all very deep, but I think if you're going to get anything done that has traction and meaning, then you've got to be clear about who you are, and encouraging people to be clear about who they are.
Which relates brilliantly to Jamie's podcast when he was talking thematically about very similar things.
Mm.
Emma, brilliant as always. Thank you very much for your time. It's been lovely chatting.
Thank you. I could carry on for days.
There's going to be more of these podcasts. You're going to have the opportunity to learn about more of us. So do tune in again. and thank you for listening.